The freezing water of the Whisper River bit into Maeve's raw hands, but she did not stop scrubbing. She knelt in the thick, half-frozen mud of the outpost, her coarse brown tunic damp at the hem. Beside her, hidden behind the curve of a rotting wooden skiff, 4-year-old Kala and Rowan sat perfectly still. They knew the rules. When the royal horns blew, they did not speak. They did not play. They hid. A heavy wool scarf was wrapped tightly around Maeve's neck, concealing the jagged black burn mark that throbbed whenever the winter wind hit it. It was a brand of exile, a seal of silence. The heavy thud of armored boots marching through the sludge echoed across the riverbank. The fishermen and outcasts of the village had already dropped to their knees, pressing their faces into the dirt. Maeve kept her head down, her platinum blonde hair chopped violently short with a hunting knife years ago. Tucked beneath a frayed hood, she did not need to look up to know who had arrived. The air itself grew heavy, suffocating under the sheer weight of a royal lichen aura. Torin, the Lichen King of Obsidian Keep, had come to the borders. He rode a massive black stallion, his towering frame wrapped in a dark crimson tunic and a heavy fur mantle. Even from a distance, the tension radiating from him was palpable. His piercing emerald green eyes swept over the kneeling villagers with cold, mechanical precision. For 5 years, Torin had ruled with a hollowed-out chest. He survived the battlefield poison only to wake up and find his mate gone, leaving nothing behind but a scorched decree of separation. The Queen Mother had handed it to him while he was still bleeding, whispering that Maeve had fled the moment she thought the king would fall. He had kept the scorched parchment ever since, tucked into his leather belt, a daily reminder of what love cost. "We tracked the rebel scavengers to this river," the captain of the guard said, his voice cutting through the silent camp. He pointed a gauntleted hand directly at Maeve's small, isolated hut near the water. "That woman lives apart from the rest. The locals say she takes in drifters." Torin's jaw locked. He dismounted, his boots sinking into the mud. He did not draw his sword, but the predatory grace of his stride made the surrounding villagers scramble further back in pure terror. Maeve's heart slammed against her ribs. She slowly rose to her feet, her cold hands instinctively reaching back to push her twin daughters deeper behind the wooden skiff. She kept her gaze fixed on the mud. "Step away from the boat," Torin commanded. His voice was a deep, rumbling baritone that vibrated through the frozen G. Round. Maeve did not move. Her fingers gripped the edge of the rotting wood. If she ran, they would hunt her. If she yielded, they would take her children. 5 years of surviving in the wilderness had stripped away her fear, leaving only a cold, protective fury. "I said, step away," Torin repeated, stopping just 10 feet from her. Deep inside Torin's chest, his massive russet wolf suddenly paced. It was a bizarre, jarring reaction. The beast, usually aggressive and bloodthirsty when confronting traitors, let out a low, confused whine. Torin frowned, his emerald eyes narrowing. He inhaled sharply, searching for a lichen scent, but there was nothing. The woman smelled entirely human, river water, dried sage, and mud. The magical seal Kaelia had burned into Maeve's neck ensured she remained invisible to her own kind. Yet a phantom ache flared in Torin's ribs. The scorched decree at his belt felt inexplicably heavy. "Look at your king when he speaks to you," the captain barked, stepping forward and reaching out to grab Maeve's shoulder. Maeve swatted the guard's hand away with a fierce, sudden strike. She finally lifted her chin. She did not bow. She did not tremble. Even covered in mud, wearing the rags of an outcast, Maeve stared directly into Torin's eyes with an untouchable, royal defiance. The breath caught in Torin's throat. Half her face was obscured by the shadows of her hood and the heavy scarf, but those silver blue eyes hit him like a physical blow. Before Torin could process the impossible familiarity of her gaze, a small, furious blur launched out from behind the boat. "Leave my mama alone!" 4-year-old Rowan planted her tiny boots directly in the mud between her mother and the Lycan King. The child's fists were balled at her sides, her chest heaving. The captain sneered and reached down to shove the child aside. "Move, brat." "Do not touch her," Maeve screamed, lunging forward. But Rowan did not need saving. As the guard's heavy glove brushed the child's shoulder, a deep, instinctual growl tore from the 4-year-old's throat. It was not a human sound. It was the primal warning of an apex predator. Rowan threw her small arm up to block the guard. In a fraction of a second, the flesh of the child's forearm shifted. Coarse, russet-colored fur erupted along her skin, and her small fingernails elongated into razor-sharp lichen claws. She slashed out, tearing straight through the leather of the guard's gauntlet. The guard stumbled back with a shout of shock. The entire outpost fell into a deathly, paralyzed silence.
Queen.
Torin froze. His massive frame went entirely rigid. He stared at the child's arm, his mind fracturing. Russet fur. Only one bloodline in the entire kingdom carried the russet lichen gene. The royal line of Obsidian Keep. His line. Slowly, Rowan looked up at the towering king. The hood of the child's cloak slipped back, revealing messy dark hair and a pair of furious, piercing, emerald green eyes. They were his eyes, looking back at him from a child he did not know existed. Torin's breathing turned shallow. The world around him faded into a dull ringing. He bypassed the bleeding guard, bypassed the child, his towering frame closing the distance to the woman in 2 wide strides. Maeve stood her ground, her jaw set, her hands moving instinctively to the signet ring hidden beneath her tunic. She was ready to fight him barehanded. She was ready to die here in the mud to buy her daughters time to run. Torin did not draw a weapon. His large, scarred hand reached out, his fingers trembling slightly as he grabbed the thick wool scarf wrapped around her neck. With one sharp, desperate pull, he tore it away. The ragged hood fell back. The chopped, uneven platinum blonde hair caught the pale winter light. And there, standing before him in the freezing mud, was his dead Luna. Torin stared at the black, corrupted burn mark marring her pale neck, right where his mating bee she should have been. He looked at her sunken cheeks, her bruised hands, and the defiant, hateful glare she aimed at him. Maeve. Torin whispered, the name tearing out of him like a bleeding wound. "Stand down! All of you, stand down!" Torin's roar shattered the frozen silence of the outpost. The Lycan King's command carried the sheer, crushing force of his alpha blood. His royal guards, who had half drawn their swords, immediately dropped to one knee, lowering their weapons into the mud. Torin did not look at them. His burning emerald eyes remained entirely fixed on Maeve, and the small, fierce child standing before her with a fading russet lichen arm. The king's chest heaved, his mind violently struggling to bridge the gap between the lie he had lived for 5 years and the impossible reality standing in front of him. "Move," Torin commanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous, ragged whisper. Somewhere out of sight. Now. Maeve did not argue. The outpost was too expected. Ozed, and her daughters were in danger. She scooped Rowan into her arms, ignoring the aching cold in her joints, and turned away from the village. She led the towering Lycan King away from the terrified crowd, walking along the rocky riverbank until they reached the roaring vale of the Whisper River waterfall. Without hesitating, she slipped behind the cascading water, stepping into a hidden, dimly lit cave. 4-year-old Kaelen was already inside, huddled near a small, dying fire. When she saw Torin duck his massive frame into the cavern, the little girl immediately scrambled up and ran to her mother, burying her face in Maeve's muddy skirt. The cave was damp and smelled of wet earth and dried river mint, but the roar of the waterfall outside provided a perfect acoustic shield. No one could hear them. Torin stood near the entrance, his broad shoulders practically filling the narrow space. The golden light of the fire flickered across his face, casting deep, harsh shadows over his sharp cheekbones. He looked at Maeve. He looked at her chopped, ragged, platinum hair, her bruised, freezing hands, and the terrified little girls clinging to her sides. Then the agonizing grief of 5 lost years finally boiled over into rage. Torin reached into his belt and pulled out the scorched silver parchment he had carried every day since he woke up in his coma. He slammed it down onto a flat rock between them. "You left me to die," Torin breathed, his voice thick with a devastation that made the stone walls seem to vibrate. "I took a poisoned blade to the chest, securing the borders for our future. And while I was choking on my own blood, my Luna packed her bags and vanished. You took my pups and ran." Maeve stared at the scorched decree on the stone. She did not cry. She did not flinch. A cold, bitter laugh escaped her lips, hollow and devoid of any humor. She gently pushed Kaelen and Rowan behind her back, squaring her shoulders to face the towering king. "I ran?" Maeve asked. Her voice was ice, sharp and unyielding. "Is that the lie you tell yourself to sleep at night in your warm palace?" Torin stepped forward, his massive frame looming over her. "That document bears my royal seal. You abandoned Obsidian Keep when you thought I was too weak to protect it." "I did not abandon anything," Maeve shouted, her composure finally cracking under the weight of his blind accusation.
No.
She reached beneath the collar of her muddy tunic and yanked a leather cord free.
Please.
Hanging from it,
No.
heavy and undeniable, was the obsidian signet ring, the true ring of the Luna. She slammed the ring onto the stone right next to his scorched decree. "Your royal guards dragged me from our bed in the dead of night while you were unconscious," Maeve said, her words striking him like physical blows. "They read a decree just like that one, bearing your seal, stripping me of my title.
People.
Your mother, the great Queen Kaelen, stood over me and told me my low-born blood was unfit to bear royal heirs." Torin froze. The anger in his eyes flickered, replaced by a sudden, terrifying confusion. "My mother? Kaelen swore she begged you to stay. She demanded my life in exchange for yours." Maeve spat, tilting her chin up to expose her pale neck fully to the firelight. She pointed a trembling finger at the grotesque black burn mark marring her throat. "Look at it, Torin. This isn't a battle scar. Your mother's witches pinned me to the floor and burned this into my flesh to silence my wolf and completely seal my scent. They made me invisible to my own kind, so you could never track me."
Keep close, little one.
Torin stared at the black, corrupted skin, right where his mating mark should have been. His heart stopped.
So big.
"She told me," Maeve continued, her voice dropping to a fierce, protective whisper,
Close, little one.
"that if I ever returned, the king would personally execute my children for possessing the royal blood he officially denied them."
Watch
The silence
path.
in the cave became suffocating.
Keep
The roar
your
of the waterfall
distance.
faded into white noise as
Stay
Torin
back.
stared at the woman he had hated for 5 years. He looked down at the scorched decree, the handwriting. the absolute perfection of the royal seal.
Keep your distance.
He had been in a coma when it was written.
Stay back.
He had never signed it. His massive russet wolf whined pitifully inside his mind, clawing at his ribs, punishing him for believing a lie, while his true mate suffered in the mud.
Now.
Torin's legs gave out.
I've got you.
The towering lichen king dropped heavily to his knees on the hard stone floor, bringing himself to eye level with the two little girls hiding behind Maeve's skirt. Calla and Rowan peered at him cautiously.
You're safe now.
Two identical pairs of
I've
piercing
got
emerald
you.
green eyes stared back at him. They had his nose. They had his jawline. They carried the russet lichen gene of his ancestors. Maeve, Torin whispered, his voice completely breaking. He raised a shaking hand, wanting to reach out to his daughters, wanting to touch the hem of Maeve's ruined dress, to beg for a forgiveness he knew he did not deserve. I didn't know. I swear to the moon, I didn't know. Maeve looked down at him, her silver blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears, but she kept her chin high. It doesn't matter what you knew, Tori. We survived without you. Before Torin could answer, before he could promise to burn his own kingdom to the ground for what his mother had done, the shadows near the cave entrance warped unnaturally. The water of the falls parted, not from the wind, but from bodies moving swiftly through it. Thwack! A silver-tipped arrow shattered against the stone wall, mere inches from Maeve's head. Torin's head snapped toward the cave entrance. 3 figures clad in the dark, unmarked leather armor of the Queen Mother's
You
elite
defy
assassins
my
stepped through the
decree?
waterfall, their blades drawn. They had not come
do.
for the rebel scavengers. They had followed the king. And now that the exiled Luna had been found, they were here to silence the truth
You
forever.
defy my decree.
The first arrow struck the stone where Torin had been kneeling a fraction
I
of a
do.
second before. Torin did not hesitate. The agonizing
I am not
confusion
who
and
you
heartbreak in
think
his
I
eyes
am.
vanished, instantly swallowed by the terrifying, primal fury of the Lichen King defending his
This
blood.
changes everything.
He let out a roar that shook the damp walls of the cavern, a sound so deep
I am
it caused
not
the
who you
waterfall
think
outside to
I
visibly
am.
shudder. His body expanded, heavy muscles tearing the seams of his crimson tunic
This
as thick
changes
russet fur
everything.
erupted along his arms and jawline. In a blur of monstrous speed, Torin threw his massive frame backward, placing himself as a living, breathing shield between the 3 assassins and the woman he loved. "Get them back!" Torin bellowed over his shoulder, his eyes flashing a luminous, predatory gold. Maeve didn't scream. 5 years of surviving in the unforgiving wilderness had burned the panic out of her system long ago. She grabbed Calla and Rowan by their collars, shoving them hard into a
burned
narrow
this
crevice
into
behind a
me,
thick
King.
stalagmite.
Remember
Do not
this
move.
mark.
Do not
No.
make a sound,
I
Maeve
don't
commanded,
remember.
her voice perfectly
I
steady.
didn't do this to
She did
you.
not cower behind the
You
rocks with them.
did.
Instead, she
You
reached into her
burned
muddy
this
boot
into
and pulled
me,
out a
King.
rusted, bone-handled hunting
Remember
knife,
this mark.
the same blade she had used to
No.
hack off her royal hair
I
5
don't
years ago.
Remember.
She stood
I
firm,
didn't do
positioning
this to
herself
you.
as the final line of defense
You
in front of her
did.
daughters. The assassins
I
moved with
saw
lethal,
it.
silent precision. They
I
were shadow
didn't
walkers,
believe it.
the Queen Mother's personal executioners,
But
trained to
it's
kill
true.
without leaving a trace.
I am
2 of them
sorry.
rushed Torin simultaneously, their silver-coated blades catching the dim
saw
firelight.
it.
Torin caught the first strike with his bare forearm.
didn't
The silver
believe it.
seared his flesh, the hiss of burning
But
lichen
it's
skin
true.
echoing in the cave. But
I
Torin
am
did not even
sorry.
flinch. He grabbed the assassin by the
didn't
throat,
wanna hurt
lifting the
you.
man entirely off the ground
I
with one
just
hand,
wanted to
and hurled
see
him
you.
violently against the cavern wall. The
I'm
stone cracked,
sorry.
and the man dropped, motionless.
It's all right.
The second assassin
children.
twisted, aiming a low, fatal
I didn't
strike at
wanna
Torin's
hurt
ribs.
you.
Torin blocked it,
I just
his heavy
wanted
lichen
to
claws
see
swiping
you.
downward to disarm the attacker, crushing the
I'm
steel blade like
sorry.
brittle glass. But it was a distraction.
It's all right,
While Torin was
children.
engaged with the first two, the third assassin had slipped through the shadows along the edge of the cavern. He bypassed the Lichen King completely. His target was not the Alpha. His target was the royal bloodline.
So long.
The assassin lunged out of the darkness, raising a short sword directly toward Maeve. Torin saw it out of the corner of his eye. Maeve! Maeve did not step back. As the assassin thrust the blade toward her chest, she pivoted sharply, using the slippery, moss-covered ground to her advantage. She dodged the strike by a hair, grabbed the assassin's wrist with her free hand, and drove the hilt of her hunting knife brutally upward into his jaw. The man stumbled backward, disoriented by the fierce resistance of a woman he had been told was a weak, broken exile. But the stumble gave him a new angle. As the assassin fell back, his gaze locked onto the narrow crevice. Little Kala had peeked out, her wide, terrified emerald eyes tracking her mother. The assassin's eyes narrowed. Knowing he could not defeat the king in close combat, he swiftly pulled a small, loaded hand crossbow from his thigh holster. The bolt was tipped with a sickly, glowing green liquid, wolfsbane poison, concentrated and highly lethal. He aimed it directly at the 4-year-old child. "No!" Maeve screamed, lunging forward. But she was too far away. The crossbow snapped. The poisoned bolt tore through the damp air, flying straight toward Kala. A shadow eclipsed the firelight. Torin moved faster than the eye could track. Abandoning his fight, the Lichen King threw his massive body across the width of the cave. He did not have time to swing his arm or grab the bolt. He only had time to intercept it. Thwack! Ugh! The poisoned bolt buried itself deep into the thick muscle of Torin's shoulder, right near his collarbone. Torin let out a choked grunt, his forward momentum carrying him into the third assassin. With one final, devastating sweep of his heavy fist, Torin crushed the man's chest plate, sending the executioner flying backward into the roaring waterfall.
Where are we going?
He disappeared into the freezing river below. The cave fell utterly, terrifyingly silent.
You're safe now.
Torin stood breathing heavily for a single second. The remaining assassins were dead or gone. The cavern was secure. He turned his head slowly, his emerald eyes locking onto Maeve, ensuring she was safe. "Maeve," he whispered, a strange, breathless smile touching his lips. Then, the wolfsbane reached his heart. The towering Lichen King collapsed, his massive body hitting the cold stone floor with a heavy, sickening thud. The green poison spiderwebbed violently up his neck, burning through his veins. "Torin!" Maeve dropped her knife and slid across the wet stone, falling to her knees beside his massive, trembling frame. The king was dying in the mud. And this time, Maeve was not going to run. The sickly, sweet smell of wolfsbane immediately filled the damp cavern, masking the scent of the river. Torin's massive body convulsed against the hard stone. The dark green poison was already visibly tracking its way up the veins of his neck, branching out like toxic roots beneath his copper skin. His emerald eyes, usually so sharp and commanding, were unfocusing, clouded by the rapid onset of the venom. "Kala! Rowan! Stay back against the wall!" Maeve barked, her voice carrying the sharp, undeniable authority she had honed over 5 years of survival. She did not panic. She did not freeze. She dropped to her knees beside the gasping Lichen King and immediately began tearing at the heavy leather and linen around his wound.
No.
"Mama, he's bleeding," Rowan whimpered, clutching her sister's hand tightly. "I know. Bring me my satchel from the fire, now," Maeve ordered without looking up. She gripped the shaft of the crossbow bolt. It was barbed. Pulling it straight out would tear the artery. With a practiced, steady hand, Maeve used her hunting knife to carefully sever the shaft, minimizing the damage before swiftly extracting the poisoned iron tip. Torin let out a low, guttural groan. "Stay with me," Maeve demanded, pressing her mud-stained hands firmly against the wound to stem the bleeding. "Don't you dare die on this floor, Torin. You don't get to escape this easily." Kala dragged the heavy leather satchel to her mother's side. Maeve quickly dug into it, pulling out dried charroot and river clay, the only crude antidotes she had been able to forage in this wasteland. She chewed the bitter root to activate it, mixed it with the clay, and packed it aggressively into the wound to draw out the wolfsbane. Torin's breathing was shallow, ragged. He was fighting a war inside his own veins. His large, scarred hand twitched, sliding blindly across the wet stone until his fingers brushed against Maeve's knee. He gripped the coarse fabric of her ragged tunic with a desperate, crushing strength, as if grounding himself to the earth. "Maeve," Torin rasped, his voice barely more than a breath. "Be quiet. Save your strength," she replied sharply, tying a strip of torn linen around his shoulder to hold the poultice in place. I thought you left me." The words broke past Torin's lips, raw and unshielded. The fearsome Lycan King, the untouchable alpha of Obsidian Keep, looked up at her with the fractured vulnerability of a man who had lost everything. 5 years. I woke up. The bed was cold. They said you didn't look back. Maeve's hand stopped over the bandage. The cold, protective wall she had built around her heart trembled. She looked down at him, seeing the genuine, devastating grief etched into the harsh lines of his face. He truly hadn't known. The man who had once treated her like a queen had been manipulated just as completely as she had been. "I fought them," Maeve whispered, her voice finally breaking. A single tear slipped down her cheek, cutting a clean path through the mud on her face. "I fought the guards. I screamed your name until my throat bled. But your mother brought the witches. She told me my blood was a sty and on the crown.
That's it?
She told me if you woke up and saw me, the council would strip you of your throne for mating a lowborn. And then she burned me." Torin's chest hitched. His heavy eyelids fluttered open, his fading emerald gaze locking onto her face. With monumental effort, Torin lifted his trembling hand from her knee. He reached up, his large, rough fingers gently brushing against her jawline. Maeve inhaled sharply, freezing at the contact. It was the first time in 5 years she'd felt his touch. The warmth of his skin sent a violent electric shock straight to her core. Torin's fingers slid lower, tracing the edge of her collarbone, until his thumb pressed gently against the grotesque black burn mark on her neck. "She burned our bond," Torin choked out, a profound self-loathing filling his eyes. "My mother mutilated my Luna." The moment Torin's skin pressed firmly against the dark magic seal, something deep within the cavern shifted. The air pressure suddenly dropped. The Queen Mother's seal had been designed to block Maeve's Lycan aura, to sever the mate bond from the outside. But it was only dark magic, and dark magic could not withstand the absolute, primal reality of a true Lycan mate claiming what was his. As Torin's thumb rested over the black scar, a searing heat flared beneath Maeve's skin. Maeve gasped, arching backward as a sharp, blinding pain erupted from her throat. It didn't feel like burning. It felt like something breaking open. "Mama!" Kala cried out. Beneath Torin's touch, the thick, corrupted black skin of the scar began to crack like brittle glass. A low, resonant hum vibrated through the stone floor. As the dark magic fractured, a brilliant, unmistakable silver light began to leak from the fissures. Torin pulled his hand back in shock. The black crust shattered completely, dissolving into ash that drifted to the damp floor. Where the grotesque burn had been, blood began to well up. Not red, but a glowing, luminescent silver.
Hold still.
The silver bleed of a broken curse. And then, the invisible dam burst. The cave was instantly flooded with it. The scent of winter pine, crushed mint, and fresh rain. Maeve's true scent. The scent of the obsidian Luna. Torin's massive russet wolf, which had been pacing in agony for 5 years, suddenly slammed against his ribs with a force that made him gasp. The severed mate bond snapped back into place with the violence of a thunderclap. The connection flooded Torin's mind, hitting him with a tidal wave of foreign emotion. He felt it all at once. The terror Maeve had felt when she was dragged from their bed. The freezing cold of her first winter alone. The excruciating pain of giving birth in the mud without him. The fierce, desperate love she held for their daughters. Torin let out a ragged, agonizing roar. It was not a sound of physical pain from the poison, but the sound of a soul breaking under the weight of 5 years of stolen time. Maeve collapsed forward, her hands bracing against his chest as her own dormant wolf finally awakened, howling in joyous, desperate recognition. She buried her face in his neck, the silver blood from her restored mark glowing faintly in the dim light. Torin wrapped his good arm around her, crushing her against his chest, as if terrified the universe would snatch her away again. He buried his face in her chopped hair, inhaling the scent he had thought was lost forever. I have you. I have you, Torin chanted, his voice thick with tears he refused to shed.
It will help.
I will tear the crown from Kayla's head. I will burn the council to ash. Nobody will ever touch you again.
Rest now.
For a brief, suspended moment, the damp cave felt like the safest place in the world.
Help.
Then, the ground vibrated. It was not the waterfall. It was the rhythmic, organized thud of 100 marching boots.
Now.
A low, resonant blast of a war horn echoed across the Whisper River basin, cutting through the roar of the water. It was not the single horn of a scouting party. It was the heavy, brass note of the Royal Vanguard. Torin's grip on Maeve tightened, his emerald eyes snapping open, blazing with a renewed, lethal clarity. The wolfsbane was still in his system, but the restoration of the mate bond had jump-started his lichen healing. "The Queen Mother," Maeve whispered, the blood draining from her face as she looked toward the cave entrance. Kaelia had not just sent 3 assassins. Knowing her son was tracking the rebels, the Queen Mother had marched the royal army to the border to ensure her 5-year-old lie remained buried, once and for all. The heavy brass notes of the Royal Vanguard's horns echoed through the freezing canyon, vibrating against the stone walls of the cave. Torin pushed himself up from the damp floor. The wolfsbane was still in his bloodstream, making his muscles ache and his vision swim. But the restoration of the true lichen bond had ignited a fire in his veins that burned hotter than the poison. He reached down and unclasped his heavy fur mantle, wrapping it securely around Maeve's muddy, shivering shoulders. He scooped Kala into his good arm, while Maeve picked up Rowan. "Stay behind me," Torin ordered, his voice a low, lethal rumble. They stepped through the waterfall just as the vanguard of Obsidian Keep, 100 heavily armored lichen warriors, surrounded the riverbank. At the sight of the king, covered in mud and bleeding from a crossbow wound to the shoulder, the vanguard commander immediately dropped to one knee, his men following suit in a synchronized class of steel. The commander's eyes darted to the woman standing behind the Alpha King, recognizing the platinum-chopped hair and the ragged clothes of the exile they had been ordered to quietly execute. Confusion washed over his face. "My king, the Queen Mother sent us to..." "The Queen Mother overstepped," Torin interrupted, his voice carrying the terrifying
needed to
absolute
see
weight
you.
of the throne. You answer to me.
I
And if a
know.
single blade is drawn within 10 feet of this woman
can
or these
feel it.
children, I will personally paint this river with your blood. We ride for Obsidian Keep now. The journey back to the volcanic stone fortress was a blur of
It
cold
is
wind
not
and
your
heavy
fault.
silence. Torin rode his black stallion with Maeve seated in front of
I
him,
am
the
sorry
twins
this
tucked safely
happened
between
to
them
you.
beneath the massive fur mantle. For the first time in 5 years,
It
Torin's
is
chest
not
was
your
pressed against her
fault.
back. He could feel the steady beat of her heart, smell the intoxicating, undeniable scent of winter pine and rain that the dark magic had stolen from him. By the time the towering black iron gates of Obsidian Keep loomed in the distance, night had fallen. Torin did not order a quiet entrance. He commanded the vanguard to sound the king's return, a specific, booming horn call that demanded the presence of the entire royal court in the Great Hall. When the heavy oak
seal
doors of the
is
Great Hall were
breaking.
thrown open, the air inside was thick with the scent
I
of burning
can
incense
feel it.
and nervous wolves. The aristocracy of Obsidian Keep, elders in silken robes, generals in polished armor,
The
and
seal
courtiers
is
who had spent
breaking.
5 years whispering about the traitorous Luna,
I
turned
can
to watch the
feel
king
it.
arrive. Murmurs rippled through the massive, cavernous hall, instantly dying into a stunned, breathless
the
silence.
spirits.
Torin strode through the center aisle. He was bleeding, his crimson tunic torn, his face
The
dark with a
silver
restrained,
light.
apocalyptic fury. But it was not the king who drew the gasps of the court. It was the woman walking beside him. Maeve wore a rough-spun brown tunic, stained with river mud. Her bare feet were wrapped in wet leather bindings. Her platinum hair was a jagged, uneven mess. Beside the gilded pillars and the velvet-draped elite, she looked like a beggar. Yet she walked with a spine of pure steel. She did not lower her eyes. She did not hide behind the king. She held Kala and Rowan by the hands, her silver-blue gaze sweeping over the faces of the aristocrats who had mocked her banishment, meeting their shock with a cold, untouchable pride. At the far end of the hall, elevated on a dais of black marble, stood Queen Mother Kaela. Kaela wore a flawless gown of woven gold and deep crimson. Her dark hair was pinned up beneath a heavy silver crown. When she saw Torin alive, a flicker of genuine panic crossed her sharp, aristocratic features. But she buried it under a mask of righteous indignation in a fraction of a second. "Torin!" Kaela called out, her voice echoing smoothly across the silent hall. She stepped down from the dais, playing the part of a relieved mother perfectly. "You are wounded. Guards, fetch the healers immediately.
You're safe now.
And seize that woman." Kaela pointed a
Thank
manicured
you.
finger directly at Maeve. "She has broken the sacred law of exile. She has dared to set foot in Obsidian Keep after
You're
abandoning
safe
her
now.
king. Arrest her!" Two
Thank
royal
you.
guards stepped forward hesitantly, their hands
I
moving
found
toward their
you.
swords. "Touch her," Torin said softly,
You're
his voice
here.
slicing through the room like a razor. "And I will tear your arms from their sockets." The guards froze,
I
stepping
found
back
you.
instantly. Torin walked up to the base of the dais, his emerald eyes locking onto his
here.
mother. The sheer, suffocating pressure of his alpha aura slammed down on the room. Several courtiers in the front row physically
the
buckled,
gods.
dropping to their knees under the weight of his localized rage. "There was no abandonment," Torin declared, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling for every wolf in the pack to hear.
Thank the
"There was
gods.
treason, committed within these walls while I lay unconscious." Kayla's eyes narrowed.
I thought I'd
She looked at the
lost
glowing
you.
silver blood slowly drying on Maeve's neck, realizing her dark magic seal had been broken. But the Queen Mother was a master of political warfare. She did not back down. Treason, Kayla scoffed, looking around at the gathered elders, playing to the crowd. My son, the poison has clouded your mind. This low-born Omega manipulated you once, and now she returns with bastard children, hoping to extort the crown you bleed to pee. Protect. Look at them. Filthy, unkempt rats from the riverbank. They are no blood of Obsidian Keep. Rowan shrunk back slightly at the harsh words, but Maeve squeezed her daughter's hand, anchoring her. Maeve stepped out from Torin's shadow, stopping right at the base of the black marble steps. I did not come to extort a crown, Kayla, Maeve said. Her voice was not a shout, but it carried the chilling, clear resonance of absolute truth. And I did not come to beg for a place in this court. I came to watch you lose yours. The audacity of the muddy exile speaking to the Queen Mother in such a tone sent a shockwave through the hall. Kayla's face flushed with fury. Silence! You have no voice here! Elders, I demand the law of exile be upheld. Execute this traitor! The only law that will be upheld tonight, Torin roared, his voice shaking the crystal chandeliers above, is the trial of the moon. A collective gasp echoed through the court. The trial of the moon was an ancient, sacred rite. It was not a simple execution behind closed doors. It was a public, magical tribunal where evidence could not be forged and the judgment of the moon goddess was absolute. To invoke it meant the loser would be stripped of their wolf, their name, and their life. Torin turned to face the crowd, his bleeding shoulder ignored, his stance an impenetrable wall of protection in front of Maeve and the twins. Let the high priests be summoned. Let the moonstone be brought to the center of the hall. If my mother claims these children are bastards and my Luna a traitor, she will prove it under the light of the moon. And when she fails, she will answer to me. Kaelia stood on the steps, her lips pressing into a thin, white line. Torin expected her to pale, to show fear. Instead, a subtle, venomous smile touched the corners of the Queen Mother's mouth. As you wish, my king. Let the trial commence.
Letting go.
Maeve's eyes narrowed. Kaelia was too confident. The Queen Mother had spent 5 years preparing for this exact possibility, and she had not come to the Great Hall without a poisoned knife hidden in the dark. The heavy brass doors of the Great Hall were sealed shut. At the center of the vast black marble floor, 4 high priests carried in the sacred moonstone altar, a massive basin of unpolished, pale meteorite that hummed with ancient pack magic. The elders of the council stood in a wide circle around the altar. Torin stood at the edge of the sacred ring, his massive frame still rigid with restrained fury. He kept Maeve, Calla, and Rowan tucked securely against his uninjured side. His dark crimson fur mantle draped heavily over Maeve's mud-stained shoulders. The king has invoked the trial of the moon, the high priest announced, his voice carrying over the crackling braziers. Let the truth be bared, and let lies turn to ash. Queen Mother Kayla stepped to the opposite side of the altar. She smoothed the front of her woven gold gown, her face a mask of sorrowful duty. Elders of Obsidian Keep, Kayla began, her voice perfectly modulated. 5 years ago, while our king lay dying from a poisoned blade, this woman fled in the dead of night. She abandoned the throne. And now, she returns with 2 half-breed pups, hoping to claim the royal treasury by passing them off as Torrens. Heirs. Kaelen gestured to the side, and a hunched, elderly wolf in healer's robes stepped forward. This is Corin, the border physician. He will testify that he treated this woman at a rogue camp years ago, and she freely admitted the children belonged to a drifter.
I will not
Murmurs of outrage rippled through the council. Torrens' eyes flared gold, his jaw clenching so hard his teeth audibly ground together. He moved to step forward and tear the false witness apart. But a small, freezing hand grasped his forearm. Maeve stepped out from beneath his mantle. She walked toward the moonstone altar, her bare feet wrapped in dirty leather bindings, making no sound against the polished marble. The aristocrats recoiled slightly, disgusted by her ragged appearance. But Maeve did not flinch. She stopped directly across from the Queen Mother. "A border physician?" Maeve asked, her silver blue eyes cutting through the lie with surgical precision. "I gave birth in the mud of the Whisper River, alone, while a blizzard raged outside. No physician has touched my children." "Lies!"
I've been in the
Kaelen
dark
snapped.
long enough.
"You stand before the sacred altar looking like a wild scavenger, trying to weave tales." "I stand before this altar as your Luna," Maeve interrupted, her voice ringing out with an authority that shook the room. She reached beneath her coarse brown tunic and pulled the leather cord over her head. The heavy, black obsidian signet ring hit the white marble of the altar with a sharp, definitive clack. The council elders gasped. The signet of the Luna was thought to be lost forever. It could not be stolen or forged. It only hummed with magic for the true mate of the king. And as it rested on the altar, the black stone pulsed with a deep, steady silver light. "If I fled to abandon my pack," Maeve continued, her voice rising above the whispers of the stunned court, "why did I take the one ring that marks me as a target? Why did I hide it for 5 years, starving in the winter, rather than sell it to buy passage out of the north?" Torrens stepped up beside her. He reached into his belt and pulled out the scorched parchment, slamming it down next to the glowing ring. "And if she fled on her own," Torren boomed, his emerald eyes sweeping over the terrified faces of the council. "Why was this decree of banishment waiting for me when I woke? A decree bearing my seal, ordering her exile under penalty of death. I never signed this paper." Panic finally flickered in Kaela's eyes. She realized the narrative was slipping from her grasp. "The king is confused. The wolfsbane in his shoulder has clouded his mind. The decree was a necessity. She was colluding with rebels, and those brats are not his." Kaela pointed a desperate finger at Calla and Rowan. "Test them. Force the brats to bleed on the moonstone. The stone will reject their filthy, low-born blood, and you will all see I protected this kingdom." She signaled to 2 of her loyal palace guards. "Bring the children to the altar." The guards stepped forward, reaching out with heavily armored hands to grab the 4-year-old twins. Maeve's hand instantly went to the hunting knife at her hip, but before she could draw it, and before Torren could unleash his feral wrath, the children moved. Calla and Rowan did not cry. They did not hide behind their mother's skirt. Born in the wild, raised in the unforgiving cold, and carrying the blood of apex predators, the twins stepped forward in perfect unison. A deep, bone-rattling growl tore through the great hall. It did not come from the king. It came from the 2 little girls. As the guards reached for them, both Calla and Rowan threw their small hands up. The flesh along their forearms rippled violently. Coarse, thick fur erupted from their skin, and their small fingernails elongated. It was a genetic impossibility to fake. Only the direct, unbroken royal line of the Obsidian Kings possessed the russet lichen gene. And as the girls bared their fangs, their small faces tilted up, revealing two identical pairs of piercing, luminous emerald green eyes. Torin's eyes. The palace guards stumbled backward in sheer terror, dropping their weapons as if they burned. The moonstone altar, reacting to the overwhelming proximity of pure royal blood, erupted in a blinding pillar of silver light. The ancient magic recognized its heirs. No blood test was needed. The truth was carved into their very bones.
No,
Kayla whispered, taking a stumbling step backward, the color completely draining from her face.
You have
No, it's a trick. Dark magic. You want to speak of dark magic, Mother? Torin's voice dropped to a terrifying, deadly calm. He stepped up to Maeve, and with a gentle, reverent touch, he took the edge of her muddy tunic and pulled it slightly to the side, fully exposing her neck to the council and the high priests. The crowd erupted in horrified shouts. There, on the pale skin of their true Luna, was the jagged, fractured black burn mark. The silver blood had dried, but the undeniable signature of Kayla's dark magic seal, used to suppress a true mate bond and blind a king, was completely exposed. For 5 years, Torin said, his voice echoing with the crushing weight of a shattered heart and a furious sovereign. My Luna lived in the mud, hiding our children from the executioner's blade. Because the Queen Mother committed high treason against the throne, against the pack, and against the moon goddess herself. The high priest fell to his knees, pressing his forehead to the marble floor in absolute submission to the undeniable truth. One by one, the elders, the generals, and the courtiers who had whispered lies for 5 years followed suit. The metallic clatter of armor hitting the stone echoed like a drumbeat of doom as the entire great hall knelt before the muddy, barefoot woman they had discarded. Only Queen Mother Kaelia was left standing, completely alone on the black marble, as the towering Lycan King turned his full, devastating attention upon her. The great hall of Obsidian Keep was dead silent. The only sound was the crackle of the braziers and the heavy, ragged breathing of Queen Mother Kayla. She stood entirely alone. The elders, the generals, and the high priests remained kneeling on the cold black marble, their heads bowed in absolute submission to the undeniable truth radiating from the moonstone altar. Kayla took a trembling step backward, her perfectly manicured hands grasping at the heavy gold fabric of her gown. Torin, Kayla said, her voice finally losing its smooth, venomous composure. It cracked into a pathetic, reedy plea. I did it for the keep. She was lowborn. She would have weakened the royal line. I was protecting your legacy. You destroyed my family, Torin answered. He did not yell. He did not roar. His voice was a flat, terrifying absolute that left no room for mercy. He stepped away from Maeve, closing the distance between himself and the dais. You burned my mate. You forced my daughters to freeze in the mud. You made me hate the only woman I have ever loved. And you used my royal seal to do it. Torin stopped right in front of her. His massive shadow swallowed the Queen Mother completely. By the ancient laws of Obsidian Keep, treason against the Luna and the royal heirs is punishable by death. Kayla let out a choked sob, falling to her knees. But I will not let my daughter's first memory of this throne room be the sight of their father shedding his own mother's blood, Torin continued, his emerald eyes cold and unyielding. Strip her of her royal colors. 2 elite guards, The very men who had once answered to Kaela stepped forward without hesitation. They did not draw blades. They simply reached out and unfastened the heavy golden mantle from Kaela's shoulders, pulling the royal fabric away. One guard reached down and removed the silver crown from her dark hair. The crown hit the black marble floor with a hollow, ringing clatter. "You are stripped of your name, your rank, and your wolf," Torn commanded, his voice echoing over the kneeling court. "You are hereby exiled from Obsidian Keep. You will be taken to the Whisper River outpost. You will live in the mud. You will wash your clothes in the freezing water, and you will survive on what the river provides. And if you ever cross the borders of this fortress again, the guards will not ask for my permission to strike." Kaela wept, a broken, powerless sound, as the guards dragged her away by her arms. The heavy brass doors of the great hall opened, swallowing the former Queen Mother into the freezing night, and slammed shut with a finality that shook the walls. Justice was served, not with the slaughter, but with the cold, crushing weight of the truth. Torrin stood in silence for a long moment, watching the doors. Then he turned back around. The towering, fearsome Lycan king walked slowly back to the center of the hall. Maeve stood by the glowing moonstone altar, her rough brown tunic still stained with mud. Torrin's heavy crimson mantle draped over her shoulders. Kaela and Rowan stood bravely at her sides, their russet fur having faded back into human skin, their small hands gripping their mother's skirt. Torrin stopped 2 feet in front of her. He looked at the ragged ends of her platinum hair, cut with a hunting knife because of his mother's cruelty. He looked at the bruised, raw skin of her hands that had scrubbed clothes in freezing water to keep his children alive. Then, the Alpha King of Obsidian Keep dropped to his knees. A collective, silent shock waved through the kneeling court. Kings did not kneel. But Torrin did not care about the court. He bowed his head, his broad shoulders shaking slightly, completely surrendering his pride, his power, and his heart to the woman standing above him. "I was blind," Torrin whispered, his voice thick with a profound, aching accountability. He reached out with trembling hands, gently taking Maeve's bruised fingers into his own.
Please forgive me.
"I let my duty blind me to the lies in my own home. I let them convince me you were capable of betrayal when I should have torn the world apart searching for you.
I never meant
I do not
to
ask
harm
for your
you.
immediate
Please
forgiveness,
forgive
Maeve.
me.
I only ask for the rest of my life to prove that I am worthy of the family I failed." Maeve looked down at the massive, broken warrior kneeling at her muddy feet. 5 years of bitter resentment, of defensive walls and frozen nights, slowly began to thaw in her chest. She had survived alone,
I forgive
but she had
you.
never stopped loving the man who had once treated her like his equal. She did not offer
done.
empty platitudes. She pulled one hand free from his grasp and gently placed her palm against his rough, bearded cheek. Torrin closed his eyes, leaning heavily into her touch, a shuddering breath escaping his lungs. "You will spend the rest of your life proving it, Torrin," Maeve said softly, her silver blue eyes shining with unshed tears. "To me, and to them." She stepped back, gently nudging Kaela and Rowan forward. The little girls looked at the giant, kneeling man. Rowan, the fiercest of the two, tentatively reached out and patted the king's uninjured shoulder. Torrin let out a wet, breathless laugh, wrapping his massive arms carefully around his twin daughters, burying his face in their hair as the last remnants of his 5-year nightmare finally shattered. The pack, witnessing the true restoration of their royal line, pressed their foreheads lower to the cold stone floor. Not out of fear, but out of absolute, unwavering reverence. 3 days later, the storm broke, leaving the skies over Obsidian Keep a brilliant, crystal-clear blue. Maeve stood on the high balcony, overlooking the vast, snow-dusted pine forests of the Lycan territory. She wore a gown of deep crimson velvet, the heavy silver crown of the Luna resting perfectly on her platinum hair. The grotesque black burn mark on her neck was entirely gone, replaced by the faint, shimmering silver scar of a true mate bond that had survived the impossible. The heavy stone doors to the balcony opened. Torrhen stepped out, his shoulder bandaged, but his stride powerful and steady. He carried Calla on one arm and Rowan on the other, both girls laughing as they tugged at his braided warrior hair. He set the children down, letting them run to the stone railing to look out over the kingdom. Torrhen stepped up behind Maeve, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin gently on the top of her head. "They are repairing the royal nurseries," Torrhen murmured, his chest rumbling against her back. "Though the twins seem to prefer sleeping in the center of our bed. They spent 5 years sleeping on the ground," Maeve replied, leaning back into his solid warmth. She rested her hand over his, the black obsidian signet ring catching the sunlight. "They will sleep wherever they please." Torrhen smiled, a genuine, relaxed expression that erased years of harsh lines from his face. He pressed a soft kiss to her silver scar. "As my Luna commands." Below them, in the courtyard, the royal vanguard raised their weapons toward the balcony, letting out a unified, thunderous howl that echoed across the mountains. It was a promise of loyalty, a recognition of the truth. Maeve looked out over the kingdom that had once cast her out, feeling the steady, unbroken heartbeat of her mate against her spine. She had walked into the wilderness as a broken exile. She had returned as a mother, a survivor, and an untouchable queen. And no one in Obsidian Keep would ever doubt the strength of the Luna again. Sometimes, a crown can be stolen, but a true bloodline and a mother's fierce devotion can never be erased by lies. Do you think the Alpha King's public apology and accountability were enough to heal the 5 years she spent in exile? If you enjoyed this emotional story of a deeply protective mother, a wounded Lycan king, and the ultimate triumph of truth over betrayal, please subscribe and stay with us for the next journey.